Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Live Show, Week 12 game-by-game preview edition. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great, and it's a great day to do exactly what I just said, and that is go through each and every Week 12 matchup to help make you a scholar, hopefully just a little bit smarter and ideally better at fantasy football along the way. So happy Wednesday to all who celebrate, including the one, the only, Kendall Valenzuela in the house. What's up, K-Dog?
What's up, Ian? I'm excited to be here breaking down everything Week 12, 3 weeks away from the fantasy championships. We got to get going. We're ready to go.
And with that, let's get after it. Time for our DraftKings opening lines. What a week, huh, Captain? It's Wednesday, and we got a lot of injuries to go over. Kendall starting at the quarterback position. Some good news. Giants quarterback Jackson Dart practicing in a limited fashion and is trending towards playing Week 12, barring a setback per interim head coach Mike Kafka. So good stuff there. Not such good stuff, though, for Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson not practicing. Hartball said similar to last week, but the one thing I'm a little bit concerned about is it was the knee injury last week, and now it is an ankle. So curiously, really wasn't able to move all that much against Myles Garrett and the Browns, last Sunday. Now, part of that was because Myles Garrett kept sacking him, and he is a big, scary man to try to play football against. But have you just, I don't know, Kendall, like since Lamar's come back, had the great game against the Dolphins, throwing for a bunch of touchdowns, but I wouldn't be surprised if we get to January and we hear like after maybe the Ravens win the Super Bowl, okay? But whenever their season is over, I just wouldn't be surprised to hear like, by the way, Lamar was kind of playing at 80% down the stretch.
Yeah, I had that moment in the game that we were watching over the weekend where I just like looked around and I was like, Lamar's playing hurt. Like in some way or form, like he just doesn't look like the same Lamar Jackson. And I think obviously we've seen that in some of the, fantasy point totals from him, but it doesn't look right. And I know we're going to be breaking down that game coming up, and I have the Ravens. And so I'm going to be talking about like Derrick Henry and them really leaning into that ground game. And it feels like that's what they're going to do the rest of the way. But yeah, Lamar Jackson, for what it's worth, like he's still Lamar Jackson. So it's not like we're ranking him outside the even top 7 fantasy quarterbacks, but it is something where I agree. Once we get to the end of the season, we're going to say, oh, he was dealing with whatever, an ankle, a hamstring, whatever it's going to be that was hindering him and not letting him, run as much or look as good. But it's been, a little bit disappointing.
That said, 3 of the next 4 matchups coming up against the Jets and the Bengals twice. It probably doesn't need to be near 100% to take advantage of those. We'll find out what happens with Aaron Rodgers for sure later in the week, but he did say he is planning to try to practice on Thursday while he continues to play through that left wrist injury. Also know Jets head coach Aaron Glenn gave up the competitive advantage, everyone. This is just completely shocking. He went ahead and named Tyrod Taylor as starting quarterback. So just can't even imagine, just the chaos and the frustration and just the pure amazement going on in the Ravens facility right now, knowing that they have to prepare for Tyrod Taylor in the year 2025. So also note Browns quarterback Shedeur Sanders getting his first NFL start. Dylan Gabriel's already been ruled out with a concussion. So hopefully Shedeur plays great, because I prefer to live in a world where every single NFL team has a great quarterback. And by my count, Kendall, the Browns have never had one, I don't think. Shout out Bernie Kosar. Shout out Baker Mayfield for doing big things after Cleveland. But really is wild. At some point, I think maybe you can start pointing the finger at that organization. Also know Bengals quarterback Joe Burrow participating in full 11-on-11 drills. Actually was a video of him running, and even Kendall practice in full. So doesn't sound like he's going to be playing this week. I don't think so. Everything we've heard has been Thanksgiving. But more and more likely, as long, I would say, as the Bengals, they'll completely face dive here, I think we'll be seeing Joe Burrow by the end of November.
Yeah, I think so too. And I would even push and say that even if they are not winning these games, because I think last week was a must-win game for them, and they obviously, weren't able to get things done. Like, I think that they're going to play Joe Burrow when he's ready, because it'll just be so long in between seasons. Obviously, when he got hurt this year up until the 2026 season. So I honestly think that if he is ready to go and he wants to, and the organization is going to let him, that we're going to see him. Like you said, Thanksgiving, maybe the week after. I was talking with Stefania Bell about that and just his recovery timeline and everything else that comes with it. And she said it's more likely that maybe he goes after, the Thanksgiving week, since it's a short turnaround. But yeah, I think we see him. And if you're there, like Ian, how do you not play Joe Burrow when he's back? That's going to be the tougher conversation for people going into the playoffs.
And you'll still see him on a waiver wire here or there. So it certainly would be a good time to try to get behind it. I tend to agree with you. I think Jaden Daniels is a guy where I'm just not quite as expecting him to suit up again, because I just feel like there's a lot more risk at the elbow. As always, though, I must remind you all that I am not a doctor. Finally, we do have Falcons quarterback Michael Penix Jr. officially ruled out for the rest of the season. He is undergoing surgery to repair his partially torn ACL. Get better soon, Mr. Penix. Over at running back, Josh Jacobs not practicing to start the week, which was expected. LaFleur, however, did not rule rule him out. Just said they're going to take it day by day. Steelers running back Jaylen Warren also not practicing to start the week as expected. We'll talk more about that backfield later. Patriots RB Rhamondre Stevenson is practicing, but it's in a limited fashion. That was consistent with last week. Kayshon Boutte, meanwhile, got in a full practice. So if you want to try to read those tea leaves, maybe Rhamondre still a week away from returning ahead of this smash spot against the Bengals would be good news for TreVeyon Henderson fantasy managers, of course. Jaguars running backs Bijan Robinson with an ankle and Travis Etienne with a shoulder are limited. Kendall, it makes me so mad that I even wrote down on my sheet Etienne before Tootin. I corrected myself, and then I just went ahead and said Tootin before Etienne. It's just this freaking hive of rookie fever going on in fantasy. Everyone wants Tootin to happen, and that's fine. Feel free to cheer for the guy, but just Etienne's having such a great season here, and I feel like nobody cares.
I feel like is that not Etienne's like career? Because when he has his down years, we're like, oh, Etienne's always sucked. And then you're like, oh, wait, 2 years ago, he was actually really good for us in fantasy football. Now we're back to oh, yeah, Etienne's not even that good. And it's like, well, he's been giving you decent fantasy numbers. So listen, I'm gonna be honest, Ian, I'm on the Bijan Robinson train because he is the one that I have in this backfield because I did not draft Etienne in a lot of places except for best ball. So I'm gonna be on the Bijan Robinson train, to be totally honest with you. But it hasn't been bad. 16 fantasy points, 15, 19 for Travis Etienne. There you go. What are we doing?
Hey, Etienne's balling, and that doesn't mean Tootin isn't a fantastic handcuff stash, guys. Again, Brian Robinson, Blake Corum, Bijan Robinson, if at all possible, love getting them on the bench. Note Chiefs running back Isaiah Pacheco did return to practice. We'll see if he's back there this week, but obviously would be, I would say, more so a downgrade for Kareem Hunt than actually a sign that we should be trying to get Pacheco right back in the starting lineups, at least for a week or so before we see what that committee is going to look like. Finally, we do have Cardinals running back Trey Benson alive, Kendall, which is great to see, but he's also back at practice with that knee injury, has had his 21-day window opened up. Comes side-by-side news that Amari DiMercado is ruled out while he continues to deal with that high ankle sprain. So would not be going out of my way to try to play Trey Benson if he is active this week. We could still see a committee of sorts with Bam Knight and Michael Carter, but good news and seemingly, again, on the verge of returning sooner rather than later. Over in the wide receiver streets, Bengals wide receiver Jamar Chase did have the one-game suspension upheld. Kendall, do you see the Mike Tomlin quote? I have no message if someone spits in your face. Do what comes natural. I love Mike Tomlin.
Ian, what are we like? In what world? Why has this happened twice? Like, it's kind of like the meme that it's like, oh, if I had a penny for every time that happened, it wouldn't be a lot, but I'd have 2 pennies. Like, why are we spitting? Like, stop! Everyone, stop! Like, we are grown-ups here. We don't need to be doing this. The fact that he also lied about it, I think, is worse. Ian, where he was just like, no, I didn't do that, and then the camera picked it up, and you're like, well, no, you definitely did. So let's just figure it out. We don't need any more of this. This is so weird.
It is kind of funny where it's pretty much considered unanimously more disrespectful to spit in someone's face than like to literally punch them in the face. So yeah, you know what? Try to stay away from other people's faces, everyone. Respect everyone's personal space. Cardinals wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. ruled out again, coming back from that appendectomy. So another week of Michael Wilson season there for the Arizona Cardinals. Meanwhile, the Falcons have ruled out Drake London. However, they are hopeful that he will return in week 13 while he continues to recover from this knee injury. Jaguars wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr. limited as he continues to try to come back from that ankle. That was also the case last week, though, so stay tuned as the week progresses. Meanwhile, Kayshon Boutte, I mentioned practicing in full. So is Chimere DK. Again, did not actually have a concussion. He was being checked for one in that game. He got cleared. It's actually a chest injury, but again, practicing in full, so not worried about his status. That honestly could actually be looking low-key pretty nice, guys, because in addition to Calvin Ridley being out for the season with a fibula, Alec Manor popped up as a DNP with a hamstring injury. So DK, I know it's the Titans, all right? We're not going to freak out and be putting this dude in our top 24, but hey, 4 teams on bye, you could have a worse flex option than him. Also note Chiefs wide receiver Xavier Worthy not practicing with an ankle. We've kind of seen them managing him, though, throughout the year, so wouldn't sound the alarms just yet. Darius Slayton, Torrey Horton also still not practicing. The Saints released Brandon Cooks, and the Packers have not opened up the practice window for Jaden Reed, despite him sending a tweet of himself that I was getting kind of excited about. I want to see Jaden Reed play football again, Kendall. The injury gods took Tucker Kraft from us. Can we please get Jaden Reed back soon?
No, please. We need it. It's going to be at a moment where we don't I just need him for fantasy football and our fantasy football playoff push, to be totally honest, because some of my wide receivers have been decimated on a couple teams. So please just give us Jaden Reed or the idea of Jaden Reed. Open up the practice window so we can pray.
Meanwhile, I think each of Matthew Golden, Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, and Savion Williams all limited. So keep an eye on that ever banged up Packers wide receiver room. Finally, at tight end, Browns tight end David Njoku with a knee injury is not practicing. He is considered day-to-day, though, and as we know with Njoku, he does have a tendency to play through all sorts of ailments. Wouldn't count him out just yet, but yeah, if Njoku is out of the picture, will be a big bump up the ranks for one Harold Fannin. Also, Bretton Strange continuing to try to get back into action. He was limited here on Wednesday. Dalton Kincaid is ruled out for Thursday. The Bengals opened up the practice window for Mike Gesicki, who's been missing a lot of time while on the IR with a pec injury. He actually practiced in full. No Jamar Chase this week. So again, deep league. Noah Fant's actually been playing pretty all right. They like to keep Tanner Hudson involved as well. But we did see last year when no T. Higgins was involved, Mike Gesicki was leaned on a little bit more. So, hey, maybe again, if you were just beyond desperate, you could throw him into that tight end spot. Finally, Kendall, shout out to Josh Norris over Underdog for bringing this to our attention. But on the Amon-Ra and the Equinemius St. Brown podcast, whatever they call it, great show. Darnell Washington said he weighs 311 pounds, Kendall. That is insane.
Dude, well, you posted the video of him over the weekend where it's like that guy at the end, that defender made a business decision and was like, I'm not about to get trucked out here, and like I'm gonna save my life and my kid's life. Like I'm not gonna do it. It's crazy. That guy's nuts.
And it was fun against the Bengals game, seeing them just, checking the ball down to Washington or getting to him in the flats. Like once he's running with the ball, that's when it's just terrifying and absolutely nobody wants to tackle this dude. I think we were a little more frustrated earlier in the year when they're throwing him fades and, one-on-one slant routes from the 5-yard line. We prefer to have, the DK Metcalfs and Jalen Warrens, the guys actually on our fantasy teams of the world scoring those touchdowns. But my God, if you don't love watching Darnell Washington run with the football in the open field, then you don't love football enough, period. So hopefully they continue to do all that. But with all that in mind, guys, let's get into the Week 12 matchups. This has been our DraftKings opening lines. But first, a word to our friends at DraftKings. Big games, big moments, and even bigger upside this week. I have teamed up with DraftKings Pick 6 to give you a new way to get in on all the action. With Pick 6, you can ride the upside by making simple predictions. Will a player score more or less than the number listed? You stack your picks together, and the more you hit, the bigger your payout. And right now, guys, there's an incredible offer for new customers. If you play $5 or more, you'll get $50 back in Pick 6 credits. That's right, new DraftKings customers play $5 and get $50 in Pick 6 credits instantly. So don't miss your shot to ride the upside. Download DraftKings Pick 6. Get on all the action and sign up using my promo code FANTASYLIFE. Thanks to DraftKings Pick 6 for sponsoring this. Let's make this NFL season one to remember. 4 teams on bye here in Week 12, so we got 14 games to break down. We're going to start off with Thursday Night Football and then go from the highest, most fantasy-friendly game total all the way down to the lowest. So, Kendall, with that in mind, let's talk some Thursday Night Football. We got the Houston Texans hosting the Bills. Buffalo is sitting as 6-point road favorites. The game total is at 43.5. So, I'll be taking the road teams in this one. So, with Buffalo, look, we love Josh Allen and James Cook, but I was just wondering, is there any other pass catcher we can actually get behind against a very stout Texans defense? And with Dalton Kincaid out, I do think there's only one name we can feel at all good about, and that's Khalil Shakir. Guys, I understand gaining -3 yards, I believe it was last week, far from ideal, but this is a matchup where I don't want to call it good because they are facing the Texans, one of the stingier defenses against wide receivers, but Shakir is one of these rare wide receivers with the way they kind of deploy him, lower A-dot areas of the field. He's kind of their zone beater, which again is rare. Most wide receivers thrive against man coverage. Houston, guys, happens to run the 7th most zone coverage in the entire NFL. So again, big time splits for Shakir in favor of actually facing these more zone-heavy defenses. And accordingly, I think in full PPR, we can feel good enough about him as a flex. So we actually have him ranked as our consensus wide receiver 28. He's ahead of guys like Jordan Addison, Ricky Parasol, Xavier Worthy, Tez Johnson, and Darnell Mooney. Still behind the Packers' top 2 wide receivers, Juwan Jennings and Alec Pierce. So don't get too carried away. But we got that going. And you know what, Kendall? Sometimes throw out the numbers. Khalil Shakir and his wife, congratulations, just had a baby. What better time for Khalil to go ahead and score a touchdown and honor that? So I know he was listed on the injury report as personal. Good to go for Thursday, and all the congrats to the Shakir family. Meanwhile, over in Houston, Kendall, no CJ Stroud for at least another game. So Davis Mills and company will be out there. You want to talk about maybe my least favorite tight end in the league? Just kidding. I don't actually hate anyone. But Dalton Schultz, someone who has maybe looked stupid over the years for just outperforming, what I was expecting.
I just knew I was doing this show with you. So I said, I need to like rage bait him a little bit off the top and just mention Dalton Schultz's name. Here's the thing, like this matchup this weekend isn't necessarily good for him. So if you're looking at a streaming option, I think there might be other guys out there for you, but I'm looking ahead as well because so the Bills in this one in week 12, they've allowed the second fewest fantasy points per game to tight ends. But if you're looking around and saying to yourself, I need to like get someone a little bit early, I need to see what's going on here, I will say that Dalton Schultz does face the Colts in week 13. They've allowed the second most fantasy points per games to tight ends right now. Nico Collins is someone that we know you don't need us to tell you that you're going to be starting him in this game. But Davis Mills has not been necessarily awful for you. And so it's not this situation where we have, Jameis Winston coming in and we say, oh, this is fun, maybe some YOLO balls, but then it ends up not getting you any fantasy points at the end of the day. So those are the two obvious ones that I'm looking at here. And then I will just mention Woody Marks here really quickly, Ian, because Dwayne did such a great write-up where he kind of compared him to one RJ Harvey with the lack of fantasy points that you got. I got a ton of questions on him on SiriusXM, but I will say if you're riding with Woody Marks, just go over to the fantasylife.com to see our rankings and stuff, because I do think there are outs for him to getting more fantasy points week in and week out. We know that he's a really good pass catcher. I think there's a lot of meat still left on the bone there. So for this team overall, as much as the Texans in real life, you're like, okay, they're fighting their claw and they're trying to get their way back in. For us, at least, you still have like a couple good fantasy options there that you can start week in and week out.
Firmly a low-end RB2. Hasn't been very efficient this year, but what better game than to improve that efficiency than against the Bills defense that just had no answers for Sean Tucker and company last week. Moving right along, the highest game total of the week does go to the Kansas City Chiefs, taking on the Daniel Jones-led Indianapolis Colts coming off their bye. This one is an Arrowhead. We got Kansas City sitting as 3.5-point home favorites. The only game total north of 50 sitting at 50.5 on the week. So want to look at the Colts and Daniel Jones and just kind of ask, like, has this dude kind of turned back into a pumpkin at this point? Because the two games before their bye, guys, they were rough, at least in terms of the negative plays. He still ended up racking up like 654 total yards of offense. It just wasn't as pretty as we kind of grown accustomed to seeing during the first 8 weeks of the season. So seriously, guys, weeks 1 through 8 combined, all right, Daniel Jones had 3 interceptions, 9 sacks, and 2 fumbles. Weeks 9 and 10 alone, 4 interceptions, 12 sacks, and 6 fumbles. So the big issue here for Daniel Jones is he was doing an incredible job of not letting pressure dropbacks turn into sacks early on in the season. And that was honestly something he struggled with a lot in New York. His pressure to sack rate in weeks 1 through 7, just 7%. That was the second best mark in the entire NFL. These last 3 games, though, up to 38%. Second worst mark, I believe, only better than Cam Ward. So again, I don't want to take anything away from Jones. He's still been leading one of the better offenses overall, but really not trending in a good direction at the moment and facing a Chiefs team, again, in Arrowhead. Obviously, Steve Spagnuolo, known for causing problems for quarterbacks, much even better than Daniel Jones. I would say if you are a good enough spot in your fantasy team to have better options like a Jackson Dart, like a Jacoby Brissett, like a Brock Purdy, I probably would lean to them over Jones just to make sure that, again, we're not looking at a guy continuing to nosedive. So otherwise, Jonathan Taylor, Alec Pierce, feeling pretty good there. And of course, everyone's favorite rookie tight end, Tyler Warren. Kendall, over on the Kansas City Chiefs, you want to give a shout out to one Travis Swift Kelsey out here, who I will add, honestly, looks better than ever what he's doing in terms of the yak game right now.
Right? Like this is one of those people that usually they save him until the playoffs and we say, where the heck was this Travis Kelsey for us during fantasy football and that push? But I will say over the last 4 games with Rashee Rice back, you've got Travis Kelsey, the clear-cut number 2 option in Kansas City, and it's not necessarily close. 7 targets, 21% there per game. And so I just look around at everyone else, Ian, and to be fair, like if you had Rashee Rice last week, you were not necessarily happy with the outcome. 9.8 fantasy points in that one. And I was talking about this before, but the Kansas City Chiefs so far this season are not clutch. Like this is almost the complete opposite of a team that we saw last season where, they were able to get away with those 1-score games and they were winning every single time. But this year they're 0-5 this season in 1-score games. And when you do that deeper dive, it just shows that they just haven't had the clutch gene. So I'm looking at this and thinking to myself, if they really need to make this push and they need to start winning games like badly, no one needs to be told that, but they might have to revert back to the Travis Kelsey days where Patrick Mahomes just feels really good chemistry. If they're really lighting up, then they're going to keep going there. Rashee Rice is still going to be involved. Xavier Worthy is awful. I mean, what do we do? You can't even, like, Xavier Worthy's been so bad. He's topped 50 yards just twice. He's scored 1 touchdown on the season. Like, you've got Marquise Brown, Rashee Rice, Tyquan Thornton, all scoring more fantasy points than Xavier Worthy this season. So at this point, they're trying to make anything work, and I think it's going to be Travis Kelsey the rest of the way, along with Rashee Rice.
My Week 12 10 Things article will be live and free over at fantasylife.com on Thursday. And my first thing I wanted to look at was that Mahomes Xavier Worthy, deep ball connection because of how bad it's been. And unfortunately, Kendall, I'm not going to spoil the whole thing, but yeah, I'm not feeling more optimistic about it improving moving forward. That said, I have been wrong once or twice in this industry before. Moving on, guys, we got the Bengals hosting the Patriots. New England 8.5-point road favorites. The game total, though, up at a lofty 49.5 because we love Bengals games because they can score on pretty much anyone, and definitely anyone can score on them. But I did want to talk about the Patriots backfield because, as we know, TreVeyon Henderson balling out, and accordingly, he is a top 7 consensus running back right alongside guys like Saquon Barkley in our fantasy life ranks. So loving all the TreVeyon. But if we do see Rhamondre Stevenson back, how far do we drop TreVeyon down the ranks? And I think my answer, guys, is not that far. I think you'd honestly argue RB13. Okay, we have guys like Quinshon Judkins and Ashton Genty there who, yes, are likely to get more touches than what TreVeyon will get with Rhamondre back in the picture. But this Bengals matchup, it's not just good, it is literally better than any other spot we could ask for. And just to kind of try to quantify this, they are dead last in terms of running back, fantasy points allowed their opposition. But the difference between them and the 31st ranked unit, which is Buffalo, is the same as the 31st ranked unit and the 12th ranked defense. Okay, guys? So could not overstate just how advantageous it has been to start running backs against the Cincinnati Bengals. So yes, we would all prefer to see TreVeyon get 20 to 25 touches like he has before. But if there is ever a matchup for him to make the most out of more like 12 to 15 opportunities, I do think it would be this one. So in terms of Rhamondre Stevenson fantasy managers, really would try to give it a week before we see what this split is. But you got to think at a certain point when a genie is balling just like TreVeyon is right now, they're not going to be squeezing him back in that bottle, but we will see what happens. Kendall over with those Cincinnati Bengals I mentioned before, but no Jamar Chase for this one. So all the T. Higgins, sign me up.
I mean, yeah, it's T. Higgins season. This is literally what we have to look at. And again, please, players, stop. I don't know what's with we got to stop doing this, Ian. We can't be talking about players now out because they're spitting on other players. Let's just stop. So Jamar Chase, like you said, is suspended for this one game, losing like $450,000 too, by the way, for the game check. So that hurts a little bit. But yeah, the Patriots are number 2 in the largest fantasy boost allowed to wide receivers. So when we look at this game and when we look at T. Higgins just kind of going to be the focal point in this one, you have to get excited. And even though they're, last time I checked, 8.5-point underdogs, you just know the script for the Cincinnati Bengals. They're going to be behind. They don't have a good defense. They're going to have to continue to throw the ball. So you know that T. Higgins is going to be involved there. I was looking at our rankings for Andre Yosivas as someone in the deeper formats, because if you're in the 10-team, 12-team leagues, you're not going to have to go this far. Andre Yosivas, though, for our consensus rankings, wide receiver 43, maybe someone you pick up, but it's really only a spot start this weekend because we know Jamar Chase isn't hurt. He's just going to be out for one game. And then, like you said, you can look at one Noah Fant if you're looking at streamers across the board. Might have better options there, but, with Mike Gesicki, everything else like that, you just have to look for him just a little bit. But yeah, T. Higgins to the moon. No one needs to tell you otherwise.
I scooped up Mitch Tinsley on my 32-team waiver wire, Kendall. We're feeling good about the opportunity at hand here, so we'll see how that goes. Probably not very well. Lots more matchups to get to here on the Fantasy Live Show. First, though, a quick word to our friends over at Huel. Give me Huel, give me fire, give me that which I desire. Guys, I'm going to give a shout out to our friends over at Huel who produce no prep, fast, nutritious, plant-based meals that don't actually compromise your health, okay? They actually have 2 meal replacement products in particular that have really been helping me avoid skipping meals or feeling bad about eating something quick and crappy during the day. I actually got right here their ready-to-drink option that actually is my favorite flavor, chocolate peanut butter, and I've been pleasantly surprised at actually how full I've stayed for hours after drinking it. So when you are getting one of these, you're also getting 35 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, 27 essential vitamins and minerals, no sugar, also gluten-free, and under $5 per meal and ready to go in this economy, no less. We also got their daily greens drink right here, which for someone who despises the existence of vegetables like me, really is a game changer to stay healthy, but be quick about it and honestly more tasty than I think some of those powder drinks I've tried in the past. So these are actually developed by registered nutritionists and dietitians. They have 42 minerals and superfoods, only 25 calories and just 4 grams of fiber with only 1 single gram of sugar. So yeah, guys, again, Huel really doing the Lord's work here, making it easy for us to keep healthy eating simple. They also just launched into Target stores nationwide. You can try both these products today with 15% off your purchase for new customers with my exclusive code FANTASYLIFE. Just go to www.huel.com/fantasylife. Again, use that Fantasy Life code and fill out the post-check survey to help support the show. That's www.huel.com/fantasylife. We're breaking down every Week 12 matchup here on the Fantasy Live Show. And moving right along, Kendall, we got the Lions hosting the Giants. Detroit sitting as 10.5-point favorites at home, 49.5-point game total. So just looking at this Giants team, again, hopefully Jackson Dart is back. And if so, he'll be a low-end QB1. But I want to give Isaiah Hodgins some credit here because we've seen him kind of coming through the Giants in the past and surprise us with a nice stretch. And honestly, I do think we could be seeing that again. So Darius Slayton, once again, not practicing to start this week. And Rhamondre Robinson is the highest ranked wide receiver from New York, but just in a small sample, guys, tiny sample, 60 freaking minutes. All right. Hodgins, 38% targets per route run against man coverage, okay? Like, he actually is the guy I mentioned before, Khalil Shakur, being one of the rare wide receivers who works more against zone. That's kind of what Wan'Dale Robinson does well. So I do think whether it's going to be Jameis again or Jackson Dart, they're going to be looking towards Hodgins, who, again, tied Wan'Dale with 6 targets last week and already had a full-time role. So they're facing a Lions defense that, yeah, is pretty good overall, particularly at the line of scrimmage. But in the secondary, they've been banged up, and they just run a ton of man coverage out here. So I do think we're going to see opportunities where, yeah, probably later in the fourth quarter and stuff when the game's out of reach. But Jake Browning threw for 3 touchdowns against this group. You know, we saw Marcus Mariota have like 220 yards and 2 scores. I do think even if it's not the prettiest fantasy production in the world, Isaiah Hodgins can be a reasonable flex option. But I am relatively alone on this, but, you know, I think the rest of our rankers are wrong, all right? He's my wide receiver 43. Dwayne's at 52. Walls and Friedman asleep at the wheel outside their top 70 right now. So, Kendall, I go through our ranks to see like where I'm just really off, and I want to make sure, like, all right, you know, are you trying to make this big of a point, or are we going to try to get a little bit more of a consensus, not completely skew things? No, I know you'll get your ranks in there soon, so hopefully you're with me, but I'm going alone, just like, you know, in euchre when you're going alone or whatever. I'm going loner here on this one. Give me Isaiah Hodgins doing his thing. Now, Kendall, for a much more fantasy-friendly offense to talk about, you want to go with Jared Goff, hopefully having a bounce-back season. Lord knows the bar isn't very high after what we saw.
Yeah, that was awful. And first of all, Ian, you're a trendsetter. So that's what we have to look at. You're a trendsetter with the rankings. You get yours in first. So we have to know we're just following along with you. But yeah, Jared Goff, I mean, because there's so many people I could have talked about on this team because we have so many fantasy assets. Like, I almost went Jameson Williams. You don't need to know Jameson Williams has been looking really good this season so far. It's at least the last couple of games. So I went to Jared Goff as the bounce back candidate because I looked at our rankings, QB consensus 7 for the week. So, you know, it can't get worse. 37.8 completed, 37.8% of his pass attempts on Monday night, which everyone watching know it was just completely awful and just wasn't going to get better there. So you go against the Giants, you say to yourself, okay, I can rebound here because they are just not very good. Over the past 5 games, though, with Jared Goff, his average is where we're probably going to see him end up. 18.3 fantasy points, 11 touchdowns, 1 interception. That's over the past 5 games. So to me, I know that he's going to get back to that. Again, consensus QB7 rankings on the week. And I look at the Giants and they're just not a good defense. And again, they're favorites on this one. We should see a good Jared Goff. We should see a good day from Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, everyone that you can think of, fire them up.
Lions implied for a week high 30.25 points. So yeah, all the usual suspects, and also David Montgomery. This would make sense if it's the week where he falls into the end zone a couple times as well. Moving right along, Sunday Night Football, guys. We got the Rams sitting at 6.5-point home favorites against the Fighting Baker Mayfields here, and the game total is going to be at 49.5. So starting off with those Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I want to look at this backfield and see what we should be expecting. Bucky Irving expecting to practice in a limited fashion again this week. Remains to be seen if he is going to be ready to go by Sunday night. And again, it could be problematic if it is kind of shaping up as a game time decision because we're going to have so many games happening before this one. So I will say, as things stand right now in our ranks without Bucky Irving in the picture, we have Sean Tucker as our lead running back in Tampa Bay, but just the consensus RB26. All right. So don't get too carried away. They're not playing the Bills again. Jared Verse and company have actually allowed the 3rd fewest fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. But that said, with no Bucky Irving, we do have Sean Tucker ahead of Rashad White, Zach Charbonnet, Tyron Tracy, Bam Knight, amongst others. Although we do prefer David Montgomery, Aaron Jones, Kareem Hunt, Alvin Kamara, and those players of the sort. So it was a good step in the right direction. But again, just keep in mind, we still saw Rashad White actually play more total snaps than Sean Tucker. And I don't think it's going to be this 25 touches to 5 touch discrepancy. So with Bucky Irving, we all know he's incredible, okay? And if we get clearance that, hey, he is good to go, no limitations, back to that usual role, rank him RB5, rank him RB10, whatever, you're starting him. If we do have some wonder, though, about, again, if he's going to play and what role he's going to have, I do think I'm going to have him more so as a borderline RB2 just for this week. With that shoulder injury, I'm just concerned if they're going to fully unleash him or give some credit to Sean Tucker, maybe even a little bit of Rashad White, who have held down the fort reasonably well enough during his absence. So hopefully sooner rather than later, we can get back to trusting Bucky as the fantasy RB1 he's been for most of his career. Just not quite sure it's going to be this Sunday night. Over on the Rams side of things, Kendall, Puka Nacua still balling, still looking like one of the best wide receivers. But, when you got Devontae Adams scoring every other touchdown out here, that utilization score can't stay as high as we're used to seeing.
Yeah, 1 reception, 1 touchdown. That's all you need from Devontae Adams week in and week out, like last week. But I will shout out Matt Harmon for these stats. He does such a good job, and you can find these stats at Yahoo, and I got this from his article that he wrote. But Puka Nacua, when you look at him in the first 5 weeks of the season, he was on the field for just under 80% of the Ram snaps, and he ran a route on 85% of those dropbacks. But since week 6, he hasn't cracked 70% of the snaps, and his route participation numbers, which you can also find at fantasylife.com, they've gone down 55%, 65%, 62%, 75%. Here's the stat that you'll love, Ian. Since he returned from injury in week 9, Nacua has played just 6 snaps in 13 personnel, has run 0 routes. Devontae Adams comes in and he has run 16. So that's the big difference here. And again, this is all numbers from Matt Harmon. It's such a good read that you guys should go and check out. But we have to believe that there's no doubt that they're going to lean back into like that 11 personnel. They can't be this heavy going throughout the season. We know Sean McVay is a genius and all of this other stuff, and he just knows everything about football. So to me, I just thought those were really interesting stats where you have, just like you alluded to, Devontae Adams and his connection with Matthew Stafford has looked really good. You have some down weeks, of course, but their chemistry undoubtedly has gotten a lot better as the season has progressed. So we're going to continue to see that. But the Rams, for me, Ian, even as a Seahawks fan, they're a team where I know a lot of people are saying there's no dominant team in the NFL right now, but I think the run out for the Rams could be really good here. And I don't think we're going to see this all the time. I think Puka Nacua, of course, you're starting him every single chance you can. He's still elite. He's still amazing, but his numbers could actually get better as the year progresses. And so I think that's kind of interesting.
And we actually just got word about 15 minutes ago. Tyler Higbee has been placed on IR with that ankle injury. So it'll make more sense than ever if we do see him get back to 11 personnel. Tutu Atwell has been out of the picture as well. So I imagine that has contributed to things as well. Moving on from Sunday Night Football to Monday Night Football, we got the San Francisco 49ers hosting the Carolina Panthers as 7-point favorites. The game total is up there at still high, 49. So looking at those Panthers, wanted to give some love to Tedero McMillan. Obviously had 130 yards and 2 touchdowns in that masterclass against the Falcons last week. It was a good reminder of just how talented this dude really is. So he is now actually on pace for 1,156 yards and 6 touchdowns, which again, in the Panthers offense might as well be 2,000 yards and 10 scores. So Bryce Young played great last week, but again, just one data point. I would like to get a few more before we, to quote the late great Dennis Green, crown his butt. So again, looking at this 49ers defense, they've been pretty bad overall against wide receivers, 5th in PPR points per game, but really, especially since they've lost Fred Warner's guys, they've gone from not great to just atrocious. So since week 6, this is the 3rd worst defense overall in EPA allowed per play and the 4th worst in terms of EPA allowed per dropback. So again, not expecting too much from anyone in this offense other than Rico Dowdle, Aaron Tedero McMillan, but just the fact that we have seen at least a couple spike performances from Bryce Young over the course of this season does give me more confidence than usual in starting them, particularly in a good matchup such as this one. But that said, Kendall, again, we got 2 guys on Carolina we feel good about. We got about, 6 or 7 guys on San Francisco that we could feasibly talk ourselves into starting. So you wanted to focus on the quarterback Brock Purdy, who, by the way, leads all quarterbacks in the Super Bowl era in yards per attempt and passer rating. I'd say he's pretty good at football.
Yeah, he's fine. Now looking back at it, it's like business as usual for Brock Purdy. And you say to yourself, oh, okay, this is probably why they wanted to make sure he was 100% healthy. And Mac Jones was able to get his. He got paid for everything that he did so far this season. But yeah, Brock Purdy for $265 million and that guy over there, he's looking pretty good. George Kittle is the one that's also stepping up in this offense as well. You don't need me to talk about CMC. If you have CMC, congrats. I'm jealous. I have FOMO, all this other stuff. But yeah, Brock Purdy finished the week ranked 6th in EPA per play, 4th in CPOE. So like I said, business as usual with Brock Purdy. You look, and Ian, honestly, looking at the rest of their schedule, they were already a team that came into this year with the easiest strength of schedule. So now you're looking at the 49ers, and I know some people are just rolling their eyes like, okay, here we go. Like there's a healthy Christian McCaffrey that we didn't expect necessarily. You've got George Kittle, who's going to be our tight end 2 probably the rest of the way. The top 3, though, are always going to be, going back and forth. But like now you have Brock Purdy back, and you say to yourself, okay, now you look at the schedule, and it's really nice for them. So everyone's rolling their eyes. I'm rolling my eyes as well. But yeah, if you've got George Kittle, you absolutely love it. He's erupted, especially over the last 2 games, and Brock Purdy's just going to continue to feed him.
And look, I mean, the Bengals, as we said before, they're kind of that just most fantasy-friendly situation with how their offense being good and their defense being horrible. The way the Cowboys defense played on Monday night, it was against the Raiders, but if they actually are improved, the 49ers might actually be the team down the stretch that, again, is scoring on everyone, but maybe giving up a lot of points as well.
Yeah.
Speaking of those Cowboys, they're hosting the Philadelphia Eagles here in the late afternoon time slot on Sunday. We do have 4 games. Thank you. Always pisses me off when we only have 3, but Philly's still sitting as 3.5-point road favorites in Jerry World, game total at 48. So if you guys remember in this first matchup, what was interesting was both A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith got virtually nothing going. And I do think in large part it was because the Cowboys ran zone coverage on 95% of Jalen Hurts dropbacks. Now, look, the Cowboys aren't the only team that runs zone coverage, but the Packers run a lot as well. They had similar, success against at least AJB last week. Obviously, Devontae Smith got his. And honestly, we've seen that more weeks than not this season against zone-heavy defenses. So this would be the one, I guess, data point where I would caution with people writing off A.J. Brown as an overall talent at this point because, guys, yards per route run this season against man coverage, A.J. Brown's been the second best wide receiver in the NFL. Only Jackson Smith has actually been more efficient in terms of racking up yards on a per route basis. It's just been against zone where things get rough in a hurry. 59th among 64 qualified receivers for AJB. So really is a Jekyll and Hyde situation. And accordingly, A.J. Brown is someone who I've honestly dropped in my rankings throughout the week as I've gotten more into these numbers. So still ranking Devontae Smith ahead of him. And just in our consensus ranks right now, there's still a good chance that you're starting A.J. Brown. I would just caution it with the kind of boom upside here. So we got Tedderone McMillan as our wide receiver 14, Smith as our wide receiver 15, Jamison Williams, and then Roma Dunze also ahead of A.J. Brown. But just again, if you are looking at AJB versus a Michael Wilson, Michael Pittman, DK Metcalf, this would be enough of a concerning matchup, I think, schematically to maybe warrant going with those other guys. Kendall, looking at those Cowboys, I mean, hey, they're facing an improving defense as well with Philly. But you know what? When you got all parties involved, maybe not the first drive of the game. We'll see what kind of trouble CD and Pickens get into this week, but at least drives 2 and beyond here. Cannot say enough good things about the impact these wide receivers are having.
Yeah, I was going to sit out the first 30 seconds of this show, Ian, just because I don't have, I've got to update my rankings and everything. It'll definitely teach me a lesson. No, but, the one thing that I'm looking at here with Dak Prescott is that, like you said, you kind of have to downgrade just a little bit. He's obviously still someone that's going to be inside our top 10 for the quarterbacks, but you're coming off a game against the Las Vegas Raiders where you saw Dak Prescott complete 75.8% of his pass attempts, 4 touchdowns. You're not going to get that against this Eagles team. Like you said, Ian, they're on the up and up, and you see Jordan Love, Jared Goff have been held to a combined 19.94 fantasy points over the last 2 weeks when facing this Eagles defense. So I don't think this is like a prove it matchup or anything else like this. We kind of know what this Cowboys team is. We know defensively they are, coming up, they're trending in the right direction, and we know what they can do on offense. So I'm just looking at this and I'm saying, all right, you've got Jalen Phillips over there on the other side. You've got, like we said, a good Eagles team that's on the rise as well. So I'm looking at Dak Prescott just, lowering expectations a little bit. And then I'm just saying to myself, Ian, and I'm curious for you as a Cowboys fan, like George Pickens is him. And we've kind of known that. Like, we know what he can do, and he's young. That's the other thing. I wasn't surprised, but I was just looking up all his numbers and his stats and everything. And still being only 24 years old, won't turn 25 until well after the season's over. So for me, I was looking and I was saying, okay, what's the franchise tag going to cost him? And it's going to be around $28 million for wide receivers this season. But it just feels like the right move, Ian. And it's your Cowboys team. I don't know what they're going to do. Who the heck knows what Jerry Jones has, up his sleeve for the offseason. But it just feels like to me, with everything that we've seen with his PFF grades, with him sitting 11th in catches, 2nd in yards, like he's just been really good for this team. How can you not pay him or franchise tag him?
And like you said, he's 24. He can't rent an RV in most parts of continental America still at this point. So, yeah, we've still seen a few knucklehead moves here and there. But just overall, again, the guy goes out there. And, I don't mind when my wide receivers are divas. They want the ball. They want to help the team win by putting up yards. And George Pickens has been doing that far more weeks than not this year. So good stuff from Pickens. Guys, plenty more matchups to break down, though. First, though, a quick word to our friends over at Mike's Hard Lemonade. Guys, a lot of times with our ads, we're shouting out cool products that you should really consider going out and buying, but pay particularly close attention right now because we're not trying to tell you to necessarily buy anything. We're trying to tell you how you can make $25,000 because guess what? Athletes, coaches, and even college players, they're getting huge endorsement deals, but the hardest working players in fantasy football and honestly this world are the fantasy commissioners. And guess what, guys? Mike's Hard Lemonade, the brand for people who go hard, is launching the first ever fantasy commissioner endorsement deal. If you nominate your commissioner for an MVP MVP level endorsement package, you are actually getting a chance to win a $25,000 signing bonus, a custom championship style lemon ring, as well as a black Letterman jacket with Mike's patches and their name across the back. $25,000 signing bonus for being a commissioner of fantasy football. Wait till your mom hears that when you're trying to, again, get that rent down for being in the basement. So cannot say enough good things about our friends at Mike's. And hey, guys, if you do think your commissioner deserves a spotlight, you can submit your nomination at Mike'sFantasyEndorsementDeal.com right now through December 9th. So do not wait on this. Again, that's Mike'sFantasyEndorsementDeal.com now through December 9th for a chance at 25 big ones. How can you not love that? Do note that no purchase is necessary. Nominator must be 21 plus only, and nominee must be 25 plus only. Note that the winner will not be hired as an endorser. You can see rules at Mike'sFantasyEndorsementDeal.com. Please drink responsibly and know this is Mike's Hard Lemonade Company in Chicago, Illinois. We're breaking down all the Week 12 matchups here on the Fantasy Life Show. And next up, we got the Cardinals hosting the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Liam Cohen squad is sitting as 2.5-point road favorites. Game total at 47.5. So, look, we mentioned Travis Etienne and Bijan Robinson coming on a little bit earlier in the show. But I want to look closer at these wide receivers and just kind of ask, like, can we overly trust any of them? And right now, guys, I don't really think we can. Okay, so we'll see if Brian Thomas Jr. gets back in the lineup. He's still continuing to be limited as he comes back from that ankle injury. But just with Parker Washington and obviously Jacoby Myers being the other guys, it's just getting crowded in offense that, guess what, we don't have a ton of production to go around. This is one of only 12 teams averaging under 200 passing yards per game. And as much as T-Law really shined bright in that Chiefs game, he's also been doing a good job running in some touchdowns. We just haven't seen that leap forward from the efficiency department that maybe we were hoping for when they did bring in Liam Cohen in the offseason. So I know there's been a lot of drops, okay, and that is the one big caveat that I understand Jaguars fans going back to. But man, just 6.4 yards per attempt this season. That is his lowest mark going back to all the way to his rookie year, Urban Meyer induced debacle. So overall, guys, Parker Washington, just our wide receiver 34, Jacoby Myers, our wide receiver 37. We are ranking them ahead of guys like Mac Hollins, Josh Downs, Jerry Jeudy, Greg Dortch, but that is behind the Darnell Mooney's, Tez Johnsons, and even Xavier Worthies of the world. So not loving that, but we are loving some, consolidated, production going on in Arizona, Kendall. Jacoby Brissett's throwing for a lot of yards, and guess who he's throwing most of them to? Michael Wilson and Trey McBride. How can you not love that?
That's all we need for my Trey McBride managers, which is myself in a lot of leagues. I'm really happy with it, Ian. Kyle Murray, take your time coming back. Maybe you don't need to return this season. Like, that foot injury looked bad. I don't know. But Marvin Harrison Jr., Amari DiMercado, like you said at the start of the show, are out for this week. And I'm worried a little bit about Marvin Harrison Jr. that they were just able to rule him out so early. I know that was always on the table, but when it's a Wednesday and we hear that, it's not necessarily great news. So Michael Wilson, Ian, is a guy that you can continue to fire up, especially when you look at this Jacksonville Jaguars defense. They have 3 defensive backs who've allowed 10 plus fantasy points per game since week 8. So he's got the flex value. He's got the flex appeal, I should say, just because he is going to be the focal point again with, like you said, Trey McBride in this offense. And then I'll also say, so they did open the practice window for Trey Benson. We do not know at the time that we're recording this if he's going to be good to play this weekend or not. But just because of all their injuries, Amari DiMercado already ruled out in this one as well. So if you've got Bam Knight, that's someone that you can look to, especially if they don't have Trey Benson this weekend. And also if you're, continuing to look around, like maybe you just say, all right, Michael Carter is someone that's going to be catching passes out of the backfield. I know that's really digging deep in, and I hope that no one's in that desperate of a situation. I know I am, though, because my running backs have just been banged up, and I really need, one Josh Jacobs to come back. Hopefully Bijan Robinson could go, but whatever. Those are 2 guys that you can look at in this backfield just because of all the injuries that could step up if you don't see Benson this weekend.
Speaking of some running back injuries, I want to touch on some of those with the Pittsburgh Steelers. They are traveling to the Windy City. The Bears sitting as 3-point home favorites. Game total resting, though, at a middling kind of 45. So Jalen Warren obviously did not practice here on Wednesday. That was expected. We'll see if he is ready to go for Sunday while dealing with that ankle injury. Again, it's been so great as a tackle breaker this season. Really hope he is ready to go. And if he is, guys, he's going to be kind of his usual mid-tier RB2 self in that same kind of range as guys like Kenneth Walker, Aaron Jones, and Alvin Kamara. It is a great matchup matchup. And we're talking about a Bears defense that has allowed the second most running back rush yards before contact per carry, which is a long drawn out way of saying, yeah, they give up a lot of open running lanes against opposing offensive lines. So if we do see Jalen Warren sideline, though, it's one of these weird situations where honestly, I think it's almost similar to Kyron and Blake Corum, where the backup running back is almost involved enough in the offense that they would probably be ranked higher than what the starter is right now if the starter was actually removed from the picture. So if Jalen Warren is out, and we're talking about Kenneth Gainwell, who worked as the RB3 in week 4, and even the RB5 last week when Jalen Warren, again, didn't get a chance to play all but one snap in the second half. So I think I would actually lean to Kenneth Gainwell as my RB13. I would put him ahead of guys like Quinshon Judkins and Ashton Genty, who are just being dealt such bad hands with their offensive lines and offensive environments. Wouldn't get too carried away. Okay, I do think the Javonte Williams, the Rico Dowdles of the world still would deserve the benefit of the doubt, but Kenneth Gainwell cannot say enough good things about his spot start potential, even if it does seem like it could be only for a week here. Kendall, looking at the Chicago Bears, been a bit up and down. They've really dominated some bad defenses and had maybe a little bit more struggles against the good ones, but hey, more weeks than not this year, Steelers have kind of been a bad defense.
Yeah, the Steelers are one where I was writing up that Caleb Williams is kind of matchup dependent, but this is the one that you play him in. He's our consensus QB 13 on the week, so he is definitely an option that you can look towards. But it really is a matchup dependent thing with Caleb Williams right now. If you've got him in fantasy, you're not necessarily looking towards the fantasy playoffs and feeling great about it. Their next 3 or 4 games, they've got the Eagles, the Packers twice, and then the Browns before facing the 49ers December 28th. So I'm looking at this and saying, all right, it's spot start season for Caleb Williams. But in this game, like you said, against this Pittsburgh Steelers defense, you can kind of load him up as our QB 13 consensus. And like Rome Odunze, you just hope also that Rome Odunze gets going or that he has a halfway accurate passer that can give him some of those deep balls, because that's what we haven't seen connect there between the two of them as well. In 6 games since the Bears bye week, Rome Odunze has had 2 or fewer catches and less than 50 yards 4 times, which is something for us in fantasy football that we just can't look at that, Ian. That is just so disappointing, especially with how bad DJ Moore's looked as well. So I'm also telling people, if you have Luther Burden, if you have Colston Loveland on your bench, I'm hanging on to them with the idea that if they need to continue to get going down the stretch, continue winning these games so they can make the playoffs, they're going to have to get some of those guys involved if you're not going to see it from Rome Odunze or DJ Moore. So if you have Luther Burden, if you have Colston Loveland, hang on to them. They're still stashes. They're not guys that you can start right away. But I'm looking down the stretch that maybe they get a little bit more work.
I do feel especially good about Rome in this matchup. The Steelers are, again, another one of these bad and man-heavy defenses, and those have been the matchups where Rome has been the best. I will also say, Kendall, some good news. I actually looked at it's November in Chicago. It could be bad weather there. We all saw what happened last week. As things stand right now, I'm knocking on wood. No weather concerns this week. A bunch of games are in domes. Seems like it's going to be sunny. Not much wind, not much precipitation. Thank you, Mother Nature. Moving it right along, we got the Ravens, 13.5-point home favorites against the New York Jets. Game total resting, though, at 44.5. So it is time now for our Vanacream Trust Meter, because we got to talk about Breece Hall and just how much we actually can be trusting him and what is, again, not an ideal matchup. Earlier in the season, it absolutely was. When you look at the Ravens defense before their week 7 bye, guys, they were 30th in EPA per play and 32nd, dead freaking last in EPA against the rush. That said, they've kind of moved Kyle Hamilton around, same kind of situation as last year. I know he's banged up right now, so hold your thought on that. But weeks 8 through 11, this Ravens defense has improved to 3rd in EPA per play and 5th in terms of EPA allowed per rush. So Breece Hall had some good games against the Bengals and Browns, but the 3 of his last 5 in between that, under 65 scoreless yards in each. So yeah, moving from Justin Fields to Tyrod Taylor maybe raises that floor a little bit, but I still would struggle to need more than one hand to count the number of offenses I think are worse in this group. So Breece Hall is someone we do have ranked consensusly as our RB17. He is ahead of guys like Woody Marks, Emmanuel Wilson, Kenneth Walker, and Aaron Jones. Still behind, more of the guaranteed volume hogs of the world, though. Quinshon Judkins, Ashton Genty, DeAndre Swift, and Travis Etienne. So overall, in the Vanacream Trust Meter, I would give Breece Hall probably a 5 out of 10. Love the talent. Cannot say enough bad things about the offensive environment, though. So can't say enough good things about Vanacream, though, guys. It actually does give guys no-nonsense, fragrance-free care designed for sensitive skin because, hey, even guys need a little bit of help with their cream from time to time. Kendall, looking at the Ravens, Zay Flowers, I don't love what you wrote here on the show sheet, the definition of mediocre, because I do maintain he is much better than that. But that said, Kendall, his production has been pretty mediocre this year, all things considered.
I was going to say, I think I want him to be better than that too. And then you look at, all the fantasy points scored or lack of fantasy points scored, and you have to say, well, wait a second, this isn't as fun as I thought it was going to be drafting Zay Flowers in the year 2025. Like, and that's just how it's been. And that's when it's so disappointing, Ian, because I agree with you. Like, talent wise, Zay Flowers can be that guy. But when you're scoring 14, 11, 12, 11, you just have to know at this point that it's a little bit mid going into this week 12 matchup. I will say for him, though, that the Jets, a little bit easier matchup here. They are number 31 in defensive pass DVOA. They've traded everyone that they've had except for, one Breece Hall or Garrett Wilson. But they're without Sauce Gardner and Michael Carter over the past month. Like they just have, and they have injuries as well. So I'm looking at this and saying maybe he can be a little bit better. But we mentioned this off the top of the show, and Dwayne wrote this up in the utilization report that this team looks like for the Ravens, they are going to center the playoff push around the ground game. And that's why we're seeing a little bit more with Derrick Henry, because to me, Ian, and I know you said this too, Lamar Jackson is probably going to be the report that we get after the season ends that he was playing hurt. And it feels like we can kind of see that in the last handful of games with him since he's come back from that injury. Derrick Henry's averaged 16 points over the last 4 games, 73 utilization scores. So I think we're going to really see a shift towards him, which means, I've already said that it's been a little bit mediocre for Zay Flowers. Maybe in this matchup, he can get us more than 11 fantasy points, but the rest of the season, I feel like he's just going to be like, that's going to be his ceiling, is like the 11 to 15 range, where he's not going to give you those spike weeks that you really want from him.
Still hasn't got a receiving touchdown since week 1. He was so close last week, just got tripped up inside the 5-yard line. The man is due. Next up, guys, we got the Packers hosting the Vikings in Lambeau. Green Bay 6.5-point home favorites. The game total at 40.5. So we spent a lot of time talking about J.J. McCarthy the last few shows, but just wanted to put some of his struggles into context. 5.7% interception rate so far this year, guys. That is the 4th worst mark among 108 qualified quarterbacks inside of their first 5 career starts since 2010. So again, even trying to give him the benefit of the doubt of saying, hey, you are new to the NFL. These are only your first 5 starts. He still has been pretty bad. That said, not to be the whole you compare any bad wide receiver to Devontae Adams to start his career. You can kind of do the same thing with quarterbacks and guys like Jared Goff and Josh Allen. But we do see Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, even Cam Ward kind of alongside J.J. McCarthy in a lot of these different stats and what they were doing in their first 5 career starts. Now, the obvious elephant in the room and kind of problem with comparing McCarthy to those guys is the fact that McCarthy is in what was supposed to be one of the better setups you could have for a rookie quarterback, getting the throw to Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, all under the tutelage of Kevin O'Connell. It has been rough. So accordingly, guys, this offense is only applied for actually 17 points. For reference, only the Browns, Jets, and Texans have less. Vegas actually is predicting and just, has it basically implied this way. The Falcons and the Texans, Kirk Cousins and Davis Mills to score more points than the J.J. McCarthy-led Vikings. So very, very sad. Justin Jefferson, we're more or less going down with the ship. Aaron Jones, the low-end RB2, we've been talking about his great utilization. Everyone else, I'm pretty much out on. Meanwhile, in Green Bay, Kendall, hopefully Josh Jacobs get healthy, but one guy who is healthy and honestly putting forward a great display, Christian Watson.
Yeah, I owe Christian Watson an apology because, first of all, Ian, I didn't even think that we would be talking about him returning until like early December, mid-December from that injury. And now here he is, and he's giving you 20.6 fantasy points in week 11. So I'm looking at this and I'm saying to myself, could Christian Watson be a league winner down the stretch? Like, could he actually maintain last week? He had a 20% team target share, which that was for the first time we saw that this season, obviously. And so to me, when I'm looking at that, 2 touchdowns, we can't expect that every single week, 20 fantasy points. We can't expect that every single week. But I do think Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson are going to be the clear-cut guys at the top of this, receiving room. Because they are without Tucker Kraft, and that was such a devastating injury, I actually do think that Christian Watson has this appeal down the stretch where he could really help win you leagues potentially. Again, we're not going to do 20 fantasy points week in and week out, but he was someone just weeks ago that you were picking up off the waiver wire. Like, we weren't even drafting him because we didn't know when he was going to return. So I'm looking at this. If they are without Josh Jacobs, especially this weekend too, I'm going to even raise him up my ranks even higher just because we know that they're going to really have to pound through the air, and that could be Christian Watson. So I saw a 20% team target share, and I said to myself, wow, if that sticks or still is close week in and week out, that's going to be really good for him in this team.
I know he had his struggles that kind of first 2 years in the league. We had higher expectations, but man, 2024, he averaged 11.7 yards per target, and he's at 13.8 right now in a small sample size. So God forbid we see them really start to really focus things more in on Christian Watson. To Kendall's point, even bigger days could be ahead. 3 more matchups here on the Fantasy Life show. We got the Titans hosting the Seahawks, who are hilariously 13.5-point road favorites. Game total resting at 40.5. So I just want to see, could we actually trust Kenneth Walker in this spot? And I do think the answer is more than usual. Okay, he comes in as our consensus RB20. Zach Charbonnet is our RB24. We are starting Kenneth Walker ahead of guys like Aaron Jones, Kareem Hunt, David Montgomery, Alvin Kamara. Still behind, the Woody Marks, Breece Halls, and DeAndre Swifts of the world, though. So again, just the problem is the kind of touch floor. Okay, he's had 15 and 19 in the last 2 games, which is nice, but still was under 15 in 5 of his 7 other games with Charbonnet active. So that is just the elephant in the room, and unfortunately, it has limited Walker, who otherwise has just been making the most out of his opportunities. I came up with the stat a couple of weeks back. I think I probably told you guys, but basically, it's cool stuff is the more appropriate way of saying it. But explosive plays, touchdowns, and tackles avoided, all divided by your total, carries and targets on the year. Only 4 running backs have had this, again, happen on over 40% of their opportunities. Jonathan Taylor, number 1. That makes sense. Jahmyr Gibbs, number 2. Marion Hampton, number 3. Hopefully he's getting healthy during his bye. And in 4th place, Kenneth Walker, guys. So, again, even with the lack of touchdowns, he's been making so many big plays, and then people miss as well more often that it has still been fun to watch this dude run the rock. Just to be cool if he gets to, a few more goal line carries and doesn't just need to do so when they're actively trying to squeeze in one last play before the 2-minute warning. So should be plenty of touches and hopefully touchdowns to go around in Seattle. Don't think we can exactly say the same thing for the Tennessee Titans, though, Kendall.
Ian, why do I always get stuck talking about the Tennessee Titans? And what do I need to do? I will pay you, I will give you $10 so I don't have to talk about the Tennessee Titans 2 weeks in a row. There's nothing I can say about this team. They're a dumpster fire. I don't know why they got rid of Mike Vrabel. They're 4-22 since they did that. The only thing I can think to talk about with mentioned Jahmyr DK. I'm going Tony Pollard, and I think I talked about him last week. I mean, he hasn't scored a touchdown in 5 consecutive games. There's no way that you should be starting him unless you're in a super desperate spot, but he is definitely someone that I've seen floating around when screenshots on waiver wires. If he's out there, I guess you can go ahead, pick him up. Tajay Spears, I guess, if we're looking at him too. But Ian, it's just bad. I mean, what are we doing? I can't even say that with full confidence. This is just a bad team.
Cam Ward makes a few just sick throws every single week. Again, I don't blame anyone for not subjecting yourself to trying to watch 60 minutes of Titans football and everything, but pull up the all-22 guys. Man, he hit this one corner shot against the Texans last week. Cam Ward is good at football, or at least has A-plus arm talent. Please, for the love of God, surround this dude in a better offensive environment in 2026. 2 more matchups. We got an NFC South showdown here between the Saints and the Falcons. This one is going to be in New Orleans. We got the Fighting Cooterdoodles sitting as 1.5-point favorites. Game total, though, at a lowly 39.5. So honestly, with Atlanta, Drake London's out of the picture. Again, Michael Penix is done for the year. Kirk Cousins, Lord Reeves Rich Rebar, I should say, had a great stat on it. I think he has 1 touchdown in his last 207 pass attempts. So we can't trust anything there. Darnell Mooney's been banged up. He looks like a shell of himself overall, just averaging 5.8 yards per target. He is our wide receiver 33, so we can kind of trust him. Kyle Pitts, the borderline tight end 1. So can we really trust anyone other than Bijan Robinson? I don't think so. I'm not going to, Kendall. This is the rare situation all season long where I actually have more confidence in the Saints than I do in their opponents. So Bijan Robinson, everyone else, I will be taking the other guy in close-ish start-sit decisions. Talking about those Saints, Kendall, home favorites. This happened against the Giants, and I believe this is the only other time this year. So shout out to the Saints. Maybe they can do something cool for once.
Shout out to the Saints. Shout out to Tyler Shuck if you need a really deep streamer and maybe you have Aaron Rodgers, maybe you're on Michael Penix. I don't know what your life has ended with for Tyler Shuck to be a potential streamer for you, but we are here for you if that needs to be happening. And I can say nice stats and nice things about him because people might have forgotten. So they were on their bye last week, but before that, he played well in his last start. 74.4% of his pass attempts he was completing, 282 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions in that game. And I'm looking at this and saying to myself, okay, More importantly, on the other side of this, like you just said with Atlanta and that struggling defense, they started off the year hot. Now, all of a sudden, they're giving up 291.8 passing yards, 2.5 touchdowns, 22 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks over the past month. So I'm looking at this defense. It's not striking fear into our eyes as much as it was a couple months ago. So Tyler Shuck, if you're in a really deep situation and you need a streamer, hopefully super flex formats, it's 2 quarterback leagues only. But he is definitely someone to look at where you can actually tell yourself a story that he could have a pretty good day here.
I actually did list him as kind of my last kind of break glass in case of emergency quarterback streamer in my Week 12 rankings article. Would love to get Jacoby Brissett, but he might not be available at this point. Bryce Young, who just tore up this defense, would kind of be the other option there. He obviously has that good matchup against the Niners. I do think Shuck again comes in thanks to this Falcons defense potentially already being looking at those Cabo flights with the way this season is going. Last one at K-Dog, we got the Raiders hosting the Browns. We saved the worst for last as always. This one's sitting at a 36.5 point game total. The Raiders are somehow favored by 3.5. I'm a lifelong losing gambler. That's why I bet $1 on games, so I still have fun, but I don't blow my bank account. I am very surprised to see the Raiders favored by 3.5 points against anyone. That said that anyone is Shedeur Sanders. So with the Browns, again, we'll see what happens with Shedeur. He's going to have a full week of practice. It is hilarious to me how everyone's just adamant, like, hey, he's getting the first team reps, guys. Like he's the only quarterback to never have that go down. But I digress. Again, not expecting much out of this passing game because we've never been able to expect anything out of this passing game all season long. So my one hope is just for Quinshon Judkins to get going again, guys, because I remember we were on, our Sunday night show, and Dwayne and I were just talking after 6 or 7 weeks about how, hey, not saying he's going to be the best fantasy running back, but just pure eye test who has looked the best among the rookie class. It was Quinshon Judkins, and for good reason. Weeks 1 through 5, 15.5 PPR points per game. That was good for RB12 status. But since then, just 10.2 points per game, RB28. And that includes that 3 touchdown explosion against the Dolphins. So not even being the, doing a dickhead fantasy move where you take away a player's good plays and say, oh, what are you doing? Even including him, guys, it just hasn't been going well. So I want to look at the Browns and say, like, well, have they been getting better or worse at the offensive line? I kind of looked at it again. Every team's running back rush yards before contact overall in the first 6 weeks, and then these last 5 weeks, and the Browns, and whatever sample I pulled, dead last in each of them. So the O-line's not playing as well. I don't think Stefanski's been doing as good of a job as usual. Hasn't been dealt the best hand. But again, this all just adds up into one big problem for Quinshon Judkins. So not exactly expecting a huge turnaround, but there's only so far you can drop someone who should still be looking at 20+ touches during any given week. So he is our consensus RB15, right next to Ashton Genty, who obviously is going to be on the other sideline in this one. We would be starting Quinshon ahead of guys like DeAndre Swift, Breece Hall, Woody Marks, and Emmanuel Wilson, still behind the Travis Etienne's, Javonte Williams, and Kyron Williams of the world. So Kendall, finish things off for us here with the Raiders. And yeah, kind of another sad running back who we know to be very good at football, but there's only so much you can do behind that offensive line.
He's good. That's what I keep telling my dad. I'm like, no, Ashton Genty is good. Please just believe me. Like, don't look at these 6 carries for 7 yards and try and tell yourself any differently. Pete Carroll, I'm begging you to do something differently here. And I'm begging to stop talking about the Raiders. Like, Ashton Genty is like the one guy that I will say here, like, he's currently averaging 12.6 half-point PPR points per game. It's not good. That's the RB19 when we look at that. And so to me, the offensive line continues to look like an absolute disaster, and there's not really good things we can say about them. And Ashton Genty has no room to run. He really is. We know how talented he is. That's why he went where he did in the draft. That's why we've said he's just going to be this prolific runner. And I do believe that can still happen in his career. But right now, it just doesn't look good. And so I'm looking at this matchup and I'm trying to tell myself good things. But like you said, consensus what, RB 14 on the week, 15. So you're still starting him. That's the thing with Ashton Genty. You just know that he has a lot more meat left on the bone. Like, there's so much more he can do than, like I said, 6 carries for 7 yards. And so hopefully we get that here this weekend. But yeah, we have to downgrade him a little bit.
So Myles Garrett right now already has 15 sacks in 10 games. The record is held by TJ Watt at 22.5. Also shared with Michael Strahan, of course, even though, come on, guys, you all remember Brett Favre, took one for the team there. That was BS. They get the Raiders. The Titans are still on the agenda. They get the Bengals in week 18. Kendall, I think Myles Garrett gets there. And if he gets 3 or 4 this week, it's going to be easy.
Yeah. Oh, and he will get 3 or 4 this week, right? Are we really believing that he's not going to? I'll say 3. Let's put a bet down for 3, Ian. We'll do that.
Like, that is ridiculous. But at the same time, if someone's like, I'll give you $1 million for guessing exactly how many sacks Myles Garrett's going to have, I think I'd say 3. I'm with you, Kendall. Yeah. So most important player, most entertaining player this week is going to be Myles Garrett. That tells you about all you need to know about that matchup. But we do hope you guys enjoyed our breakdown of every Week 12 matchup. If you did like the show, then please like the show, and always helps when you hit that little subscribe button as well. So thank you, Kendall, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Fantasy Live Show. For K-Dog, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again, and take care, everybody.